Hi there friends, this is Michelle from LaFonda Crafts. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to start with some Halloween fun and we're going to be using this burlap. So let's get started. So this particular part of the project was inspired by Lisa from Choose Joy Crafts and Creations. I will link her Facebook page in the description. So what I'm doing is I'm just tracing this paper plate onto the burlap and cutting out the circle. The roll of burlap I got at Michael's, but you can buy burlap wherever they sell material. So what I did here is I poured out the Mod Podge that I had in that bigger container onto the plate, and it wasn't that much Mod Podge, so I'm pretty much exhausting all the Mod Podge that I had. I didn't realize I was so low. And I'm just kind of working the Mod Podge into all the fibers of the burlap. I would be kind of curious to try this with school glue. It might also work with that, and that might be a cheaper option. So once I soaked the burlap pretty well, I'm rolling it into a cone, and I'm going to pin this down with just a clothespin, just a little straight pin, I guess. So that's just going to hold it together. And I have this kids toy cone. It's from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just gonna place it onto the cone, and I'm gonna fold up the bottom part that's kind of longer, and I'm gonna let this dry, and it's going to make a hat. So Lisa has been making these hats and putting them on all sorts of projects. They're really adorable, and she has a tutorial on her Facebook page for making these hats, and hers are so cute. So I didn't show it on camera, but I also bent the very top of that hat, just kind of bent it to make like a little curved tip of the hat, and I just let it dry overnight. So this is the next day. This is really hard. It's very stiff, and the Mod Podge did a great job of just making this little hat. So my idea was to put it on this pumpkin, and just going back to that paper plate, I believe it was probably like a 9-inch plate if you want a hat more or less that size. So this pumpkin I just had in my stash, and I didn't want this particular color, so I'm just painting it with Deco Art. I think it's burnt orange. I'll have to look, and I'll list it in the description for the video. So I gave the pumpkin 2 coats of that paint. I had debated for a while whether I was going to make a jack-o'-lantern face on this pumpkin or a scarecrow face. But honestly, I had to just admit that my artistic talents are limited, so I went with a jack-o'-lantern face. I thought that would be easier. So I'm just drawing a little face here with a pencil. So I'm not sure if you can see it there on the camera. It's just a very basic jack-o'-lantern face, and I'm tracing it with this Posca paint pen. You can, if you feel comfortable, do the same thing with a paintbrush, but I thought a Posca paint pen would be more my speed. So I trace it, and I fill in all the spaces with the paint pen as well. So here's the face all painted in. And what I'm showing you here is a small angled brush that I have. I'm getting this brush wet and I sort of dab the water off. I dip just the tip of that brush into white acrylic paint, and then I just sort of brush my paintbrush back and forth to spread the paint down through the rest of the brush, but it's still wet. So when I paint with it, most of the paint is at the tip and then it kind of waters down through the rest of the brush. So when you paint, it's going to give you a little bit of a like shadow effect. Now this is really the first time that I tried this and I thought it turned out pretty well. So I did the two eyes there. I have been watching Melonee from Painting Crafty. I'll link her YouTube channel in the description. She paints in watercolor and in acrylics, and so when she does acrylic, she teaches you that the float technique, and she does an excellent job of explaining it. And I've also been watching Craftinmom's Corner Market. She's on Facebook and she's on YouTube as well. I'll link her info in the description as well. And she teaches this and she teaches it really well too. So if you want to learn this technique, I suggest you follow them. They're both excellent painters. So here I am doing the same thing to the mouth of the jack-o'-lantern. So I'm just going right along the edge of the mouth just to give it like a little shadow. Now this is kind of like the glow of the jack-o'-lantern. At least that was kind of my idea of what this would be. So I'm going back and I'm trying to get closer to the edge of the eyes. That way you don't see the black right at the edge. It'll just be white right at the edge. So I was just trying to get closer to the very edge of my eyes. So that's how that's looking. And I'm just going over the mouth again. So it just kind of, your paint gets diluted as you get to the edge of the brush. So it just gives a little shadow effect. So now I'm using this stylus. I got this from Dollar Tree. I'm just dipping it into the white paint. And I'm just going to add a little sparkle to those triangle eyes. And I think that these little sparkles always give these, the eyes just more life, for lack of a better word, I guess. So now I'm going in to the nose, doing that float technique. So I've been wanting to try this float technique and I thought, okay, this would be a good opportunity to finally try. So again, I got my paintbrush wet and now I got black paint on it and I'm just brushing it just to distribute the paint down the brush. So I'm trying to create a little shadow here under the eyes, under the nose, and under the mouth. So I'm doing this again just to try to darken up my shadows a little bit more. So here's what it looks like. You can see it more under the eyes and the nose. The shadow under the mouth is very subtle. So I'm going back with my orange paint, and I just went a little past where the nose is, and I think one of the eyes. I just went kind of past where the nose is, so I'm just going to paint in a little bit of orange where the shadow is just too far out. Oh, and same thing there with the tooth. So I'm just touching up the orange there. So here's my little jack-o'-lantern face with the dimensions from like the glowing light and the shadows. So what I have here is some clear wax from Folk Art. So I'm just going to pour this out into my little tray. And I'm going to add a few dots of my white acrylic paint. And I'm just mixing it in with my paintbrush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of that white wax now into the grooves of the pumpkin, just to give it a little bit more interest. So I'm just painting in the grooves. And just with some damp paper towel, I'm going to wipe off the excess until I get the look that I like. So I just want this to be a very soft white, just to make it look, you know, it's obviously not realistic, but just to give it more of a realistic look of the pumpkin. So I'm going to go through the whole entire pumpkin and do the same thing. So here it is with that white wax. So I let that white wax dry, and now I'm going in just with the clear wax. I want it to add the wax to the whole entire pumpkin, just to give it a very subtle sheen and just to give my paint a little bit of protection. I didn't want it to get scratched up. So the wax does a nice job of serving as a top coat. So now the pumpkin has just a little subtle sheen to it, which I like. So this is going to be a witch's hat, so obviously I want to paint it black. So I'm just using some black acrylic paint. And I'm just trying to paint in all the little fibers. I did eventually change to a smaller brush just to get into the finer grooves of the hat. So I cut down some styrofoam. I just cut out a little rectangle. I added some Titebond Quick and Thick, and I added it to sort of like close to the perimeter of the rectangle, and I added the hot glue there in the middle of the pumpkin, and then just kind of around where I saw it needed more glue. So just to make sure that this styrofoam doesn't go anywhere, I'm just sticking my U-pins into the styrofoam at a diagonal, and then that will go into the pumpkin as well, because the pumpkin is just foam. So you can see there I've got my pins, and that really secures down that styrofoam. And I'm adding in some Spanish moss just to cover up the styrofoam. So this will be mainly covered up with florals, but if anything pokes through, all you can see is the Spanish moss and not the green foam. So I've added a floral U-pin to my hat there at the fold, and I'm going to stick that into my pumpkin. So I want this hat to kind of sit kind of slanted on the pumpkin's head. So it's going to look more or less like this with it slanted. And then I'm adding in another U-pin. It's going through the hat and into that foam block. So the hat is very secure on there. And I'm adding some glue just to secure down the hat and the floral pins that are attaching it to the pumpkin and to that styrofoam block. So I'm going in with some eucalyptus and adding it all around. That will be my base greenery. You can see that I'm adding hot glue to all the little stems before I poke them into the foam. I'm adding in some of these orange oak leaves, and they also have some orange berries on them. So I'm just kind of going around. And I decided to stop with the florals for the moment to add a bow. So I'm just making a small bow. The loops are probably about 3 inches. It's just going to be a 2-loop bow with 2 tails. I'm just checking that the loops are even and cutting the tails at a slant. And I'm using some floral wire to secure my bow. So with my pliers, I'm just twisting the wire really tight, and then I'm going to keep twisting the wire, and that will serve as a pick to insert into the foam. So here it is with the bow. Now I added it to the side of the jack-o'-lantern because I didn't want the bow to cover up any of the little face. I have this sharp weeding tool. I got this at Dollar Tree as well. And I'm just trying to make a little pilot hole through the burlap hat and into the pumpkin. And in that little hole, I'm going to add some more of my florals. So there's just more oak leaves with the berries. So this is what it looks like so far. And then I just continue adding more greenery around the jack-o'-lantern. Now I'm adding some black and white berries that I had from a Halloween pick. And I needed to add some length to this particular set of berries, so I'm using some floral wire and just wrapping it around the stem. So with the wire, I'm just twisting it, and I'll make another little pick which will be longer, and then that I can stick that into the floral foam. So I'm making another little pilot hole into the hat, and I'm going to add more of those berries. And I'm just using my pliers just to help me push that pick in. And for this one, I'm just adding just an extra stem that I had. I'm going to add hot glue to glue the two pieces together. And then I'm going to wrap that little joint with some floral tape. And that's how I make a lot of my picks when I have to add length. I use this technique a lot. And everything has held up very well. So there I wrapped it with floral tape. And now I can add some hot glue and insert it into the foam. So here's the pumpkin so far. Now I'm adding some orange eucalyptus leaves. And the thing about a project like this is you can use a lot of your leftover materials because you only need a little bit. So this is what I'm doing. Just using a lot of my stash. Now I'm going to add some of these orange berries. And some of the greenery that I was working with had these little, just like little berries, for the lack of a better word. So I wanted to incorporate some of these into the arrangement. So again, I'm adding some floral wire. This particular piece didn't have a pick at all, so I'm just making my own pick with the floral wire. I'm using some extra stems that I always save. I'm adding hot glue, and I'm adding the stick to the little hole in that particular bundle. So again, I'm going in with my weeding tool to make a pilot hole, and then I can stick that pick into my hat. So there it is, looking so cute. And then I'm making another pick here, and I'm going to add that to the center of my bow. So this is pretty much it. I will have some footage of the finished product at the end here. I really appreciate you watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. I think this little jack-o'-lantern turned out so cute with his little smile. You have to let me know what you think, and I hope you come back and watch more of my videos and learn something new. I'd really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you guys next time. Thanks, friends. Bye.